Today we are jumping right into the dead of winter, 1944. We're going to break down the Battle of the Bulge.
And this wasn't just another battle. This was really Hitler's last big all-or-nothing gamble on the Western Front.
Exactly. So set the scene for us. It's late 1944. What's the situation?
Well, the Allies, so that's mainly the Americans, British, and others, they've pushed all the way across France after D-Day. They're right up against the German border.
So it sounds like the war is almost over.
It looked that way. The German army was retreating. They were battered. They were running low on, well, everything. But Hitler had this one last, incredibly bold plan.
And the goal wasn't just to win a battle, was it? It was bigger than that.
Much bigger. The idea was to punch through the Allied lines, split the British and American armies, and then race to capture the port city of Antwerp in Belgium.
Antwerp, why was that city so important?
It all comes down to logistics, supplies. Antwerp was the key port the Allies were using to bring in everything they needed. Millions of tons of food, fuel, ammunition.
So if Germany captures Antwerp,
They crippled the Allied supply chain. It would have been a catastrophic blow, and Hitler hoped it would force Britain and America to negotiate a peace deal. It was a huge, huge gamble.
a gamble that depended entirely on surprise. So let's talk about how they pulled that off. They chose the Ardennes forest.
Right, in Belgium and Luxembourg. And the Ardennes was, a quiet sector. It's very hilly, lots of trees, not great roads,
So the Allies just assumed nobody would launch a major attack there?
pretty much. They figured it was too difficult for a big tank offensive, so they used it as a place for new troops to get their bearings or for veterans to rest. It was lightly defended.
The perfect blind spot.
The perfect blind spot. And for weeks, the Germans moved hundreds of thousands of men, tanks, artillery, all of it, into position completely in secret.
How do you even hide an army?
You move only at night, you have total radio silence, and you give the operation a very boring, defensive-sounding code name. Operation Watch on the Rhine.
Deceptive.
Very.
Yeah.
It was designed to make any Allied intelligence that picked up on it think, oh, they're just setting up defenses.
But the deception went even further. This is where it gets into some real spy movie stuff.
Oh, yeah. The Skorzeny Brigade. These were special German commando units.
And what was so special about them?
The soldiers in them spoke perfect American accented English. They were given captured American uniforms, jeeps, everything.
And sent behind the lines.
It's behind the lines to cause absolute chaos. They were cutting telephone wires, switching road signs.
Imagine being an American soldier. It's freezing cold. There's thick fog. And the guy directing you at a crossroads is actually the enemy sending you into an ambush.
It was pure psychological warfare. It was designed to make American troops distrust everyone. A brilliant and terrifying tactic.
So they gathered this huge force, nearly 30 divisions. But what was the quality of these soldiers?
That's the key question. They were not the elite troops of 1940. Germany had lost so many of its best men by this point.
So who was left?
Well, the tank divisions were still very dangerous, often led by veterans. But the infantry, the regular soldiers, they were often either teenagers from the Hitler Youth or older men who had been called back to fight.
So a real mix. They had the numbers, but maybe not the experience.
Exactly. Which meant they needed to win, and win fast. And that brings us to the weather.
Right. They waited very specifically for bad weather.
The worst weather possible.
Ugh.
Freezing cold, heavy fog, thick clouds. Because Hitler knew the Allies had one massive advantage he couldn't counter.
Air power.
Air power. The Allied fighter bombers could destroy tanks and trucks almost at will. But if the planes can't fly because of the weather,
Then the German tanks are safe. The clouds provided the perfect camouflage for the whole attack.
and that's the setup. So on the morning of December 16th, 1944, a massive artillery barrage erupts in the Ardennes.
And then came the tanks and soldiers pouring out of the
The
fog.
American troops there were just completely overwhelmed, totally surprised. Many of them had never seen combat before. And when a German Tiger tank suddenly appears a few yards away,
There's not much you can do.
you retreat. And as the Americans were pushed back, the German advance created this huge, deep curve in the Allied front line on the maps.
Which is where we get the name.
That's it, the Battle of the Bulge.
Now, you said the weather was the Germans' ally at first, but it quickly became an enemy to everyone.
Oh, absolutely. This was one of the coldest winters on record. We're talking temperatures dropping well below freezing, deep snow, ice everywhere. It was miserable.
And for the soldiers on the ground, just surviving was a battle in itself.
Imagine trying to dig a foxhole. You can't. The ground is frozen solid like concrete. A lot of the American troops in that sector didn't even have proper winter boots or coats
Why not?
because it was supposed to be a quiet area. The thinking was they'd be rotated out soon, so things like frostbite were a huge, huge problem.
And it wasn't just the men, the machines were failing too.
Right. Tank engines, truck engines, they would freeze solid. It was a struggle just to get the vehicle started, let alone fight with them.
So in the middle of all this chaos and cold, the battle comes to focus on one tiny town,
Bastogne.
Bastogne, Belgium. It wasn't a big city, but it was critical. Roads. It was a major road hub. 7 main roads met in Bastogne. For the German tanks to keep moving fast towards Antwerp, they needed to control those roads.
So the Allies had to hold it.
At all costs. They rushed in the 101st Airborne Division, the paratroopers, to defend the town. And almost immediately, the Germans surrounded them.
So they're cut off. No supplies, no reinforcement.
Completely encircled. They're being shelled constantly, running low on ammunition, food, medical supplies, everything.
And the German commander sends them a message.
He does. He sends a formal demand to American commander, General Anthony McAuliffe. Basically, you're surrounded. Surrender honorably to save your men.
And McAuliffe's reply is now legendary.
It's one word.
Nuts.
Nuts. The Germans were apparently very confused. They had to ask what it meant.
But that one word became a symbol for the whole defense, didn't it? That refusal to quit. It really did. And by holding Bastogne, the 101st did something incredibly important. They gummed up the whole German advance. The German tanks had to go around the town on bad, icy forest roads, which wasted precious time and critically precious fuel.
And that bought time for the rest of the Allies to react.
Exactly. And the main reaction came from the south, from General George S. Patton's Third Army.
So what did he do?
Well, the Supreme Commander, General Eisenhower, gave the order. And Patton did something that military planners still study today. He turned his entire army 90 degrees.
His whole army?
Hundreds of thousands of men, thousands of tanks and trucks, all of their supplies, pivoted them 90 degrees and sent them racing north through the ice and snow to relieve Bastogne. Just an incredible logistical feat.
But the real turning point, the thing that changed everything, happened in the sky.
Yep. For about a week, the Germans had the cloud cover they wanted. But then, on December 23rd, the weather broke.
The sun came out.
Sun came out, the skies cleared, and the Allied Air Force was unleashed. Thousands of planes took off.
And all those German tanks that had been moving freely were suddenly
Exposed. They were sitting ducks on the roads. And Allied planes just hammered them. They went after the tanks, but more importantly, they went after the supply trucks carrying the fuel and ammunition.
The planes also became a lifeline for the guys in Bastogne.
A critical lifeline. Cargo planes started dropping supplies, food, medicine, and especially ammunition, right into the surrounded town. It was exactly what they needed.
And this really gets to the fatal flaw in Hitler's entire plan, doesn't it? It wasn't just the air power.
No, it was logistics, fuel. Those big German tanks, the Tigers, were amazing machines, but they drank gasoline.
And the German plan was just to capture American fuel depots along the way.
It was. They didn't have enough of their own, so the whole offensive relied on capturing Allied fuel.
But that didn't happen.
It didn't. Even as they retreated, the American soldiers did what they were ordered to do. They destroyed their own fuel dumps. They set them on fire.
So the German advance literally ran out of gas.
That's the bottom line. The German offensive ground to a halt, not because they lost one single battle, but because their tanks just stopped moving. Many were simply abandoned in the snow, out of fuel.
So once the German spearhead stalled, the Allies could start pushing back.
Right. Patton's forces broke through from the south to relieve Bastogne, and other armies pushed from the north. They began to slowly squeeze and eliminate the Bulge.
That fighting must have been awful.
Horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Close quarters fighting in the forests and the snow. But by late January of 1945, the Germans were pushed back to where they started.
And the cost, the human cost of this battle is just staggering.
It is. For the United States, this was the largest and bloodiest battle of the entire Second World War. Over 19,000 American soldiers were killed.
And for Germany?
Even worse. Their losses were around 100,000 killed, wounded, or captured. And you also have to remember the civilians in Belgium and Luxembourg who were caught in the middle of it all.
And in terms of military hardware and experience?
Germany lost its last major reserves. Their best remaining tank divisions were shattered. They threw everything they had left into this one gamble.
And they lost. What did that mean for the end of the war?
It sped it up. The failure of the Bulge meant Germany had nothing left to stop the final Allied invasion of Germany itself. The road to Berlin from the west was now open.
So at the end of the day, it was a massive, desperate gamble that was defeated by, what, Allied grit and better supply lines?
I think so. It was a plan that relied on secrecy and luck, but it failed because of American determination, incredible Allied logistics, and of course that overwhelming air power once the skies finally cleared.
You know, it's amazing to think about how one single word, nuts, came to symbolize that refusal to give up, even when you're surrounded and freezing. That spirit, combined with the might of the Allied armies, really sealed the fate of the Western Front.
It really did, a defining moment.
Good luck with your studies.